Thank you. Great. Thank you, Ramona. Hi, everyone, and good morning. Thank you so much for introducing yourselves in the chat. I see we've got some people lots from Maryland, obviously. We've got some from other states, and I'm just excited that you're all here this morning. I hope you find this to be very useful. My name is Rachel Riggs, and I work at Frederick Community College as an ESL instructional specialist. I'm really excited to be here with you guys. I come from a background of teaching ESL, and I just transitioned into the instructional specialist role last fall. So I am not, I still feel like I identify most as a teacher. I have been focusing a lot of my passion and energy in EdTech tools and EdTech implementation, but I also do a lot with digital literacy and teaching digital skills. So, a lot of computer technology, geeky stuff that I'm into. On the screen, you're going to see a QR code. So if you have an iPhone and you open your camera and you hold it over that code, then it will open for you a Wakelet with the materials from today's presentation. I can also put that link into the chat, which I'm doing now. So if you want to go ahead, you can skip ahead, flip through my slides, look at everything, and you have access to all of those materials. So that's there for you. And I'm going to go ahead and get started. Today I want to first just define some terms like EdTech, emergency remote teaching, and an EdTech toolkit, obviously. I want to show you guys some examples of what I mean by an EdTech toolkit, and this is going to be very collaborative. There's going to be a lot of participation elements, so just be prepared for that. Be ready to interact and share your ideas and examples and all of that. Then we'll talk a little bit about evaluating EdTech tools. What questions should we be asking ourselves before we choose a tool to use in the classroom or in our program? And then I'm just going to give you guys resources that you can walk away from this presentation and start thinking about how you will create your own EdTech tool kit. Not EdTech tool. It takes a lot of development, and not that I doubt that you guys could do it, but I couldn't do it. So what is an EdTech tool? What is an EdTech tool? I think a lot of us know this by now, or at least we're familiar with some of them, but maybe haven't given them this name. An EdTech tool is an educational technology tool, and it's just a digital tool that we use for learning or teaching. It can be used for any variety of objectives, any variety of strategies or purposes. But it's basically just any of the tools that we are using to deliver educational content. Some examples are assessment tools like Quizlet, or what are others? Google Forms. You guys probably have a whole list in your head. And then there's communication tools. So there are the texting apps like WhatsApp and Remind. There are learning management systems like Canvas and Google Classroom. And so EdTech tools really encompasses all of these different types of tools that can be used with students for learning. And then I also want to talk a little bit about emergency remote teaching, because this kind of frames the idea of why is it important to build our EdTech toolkit. Emergency remote teaching is what we have all been doing for the past year. It's a temporary shift of instructional delivery to an alternate delivery mode due to crisis circumstances. Emergency remote teaching is characterized by an increased level of problem solving, obviously, because it's a quick shift, and then also a shift to teachers taking on more of a role of instructional designers or curriculum developers, because teachers have to quickly think about, how am I going to deliver this content? How am I going to reach these objectives with my students? And they begin designing really their own curriculum around whatever resources they had previously. So it's kind of a shift in the teacher's role when we talk about emergency remote teaching and what you guys have been doing over the last year in response to COVID-19. It also requires more teacher support. because of the unique challenges. And obviously it's characterized by being rapid and temporary. And so that's something I want to talk about, is how we have gone from a year of emergency remote teaching and quickly acquiring and implementing new EdTech tools. How are we going to transition back? How are we going to take these lessons that we've learned in instructional design and move them to a more intentional approach that's not rapid and temporary, but is well thought out and permanent? Maybe not permanent, nothing is permanent, right? But and so in terms of emergency remote teaching, I also like to talk about, because I've been studying lately and it's just a point of interest for me, the fact that we are not the first to do this. And there are actually a lot of cases out there where emergency remote teaching has happened. If you know of such a case and you want to throw it in the chat box, if you're aware of other situations where emergency remote teaching took place outside of the coronavirus, and you can put that in the chat for us, I would love it, because I'm a little bit of a nerd now about this topic. One example is in Afghanistan, when girls were being targeted, girls who were going to school were being targeted in conflict, and they had to keep all of the girls at home for their learning. And so they turned to radio, using the radio and using DVDs to deliver education to those girls. Yeah, great. So weather events can be a cause for emergency remote teaching. So Jesse put hurricane prone areas, and I'd throw tornado prone areas in there too. And then also snow days, right? So Peg said there will be no more snow days because we've become, maybe we've become too good at emergency remote teaching. Okay. And then Charla says years ago, there was an emergency road closure that cut off a portion of our school body from reaching the school building for a time. Yeah, so there are actually a lot of situations that might prompt emergency remote teaching. So in terms of EdTech tools, right? So over the last year, I don't know about you guys, but I think we're all in this together and we can all relate with this. Over the last year, I have been taking EdTech tools and throwing them into a bucket of knowledge in my brain, and just basically soaking up any EdTech experience and knowledge that I can. So I've used a lot of my free time just clicking around, creating Google Forms, creating Padlets, creating Wakelets, and all of these things. And I've kind of just, it's like I've been throwing them into a bucket in case I need them. And it's been frantic and rapid. And so I would love to hear from you guys, how many EdTech tools do you think that you learned this past year during emergency remote teaching? So you can use these answers: 0, 1 to 3, 3 to 5, or more than 5. But just give me your estimates. I'm interested to hear. More than 5. Okay. 3, more than 5. Okay, great. More than 5. 5 plus. Okay, good. Yeah, that's kind of what I was expecting. I thought that you guys could relate with that. More than 5 seems to be the most popular answer. We've got some 3 to 5s. But yeah, we've been really learning a lot, which is great. And now we're transitioning. And so now it's time to think about, how can I be more intentional and consistent about this? And how, teachers, you don't have endless amounts of time. How can you save yourself time rather than watching all these webinars and just taking, I need it. How can we think about, do I really need it? And I've got a pretty nice toolkit here. Maybe I don't have any gaps in it right now and I don't need to learn any new EdTech tools. So what is an EdTech toolkit? I think from my little spiels, you can probably tell by now, an EdTech toolkit is a program or an instructor's chosen set of EdTech tools implemented consistently and purposefully with learners. And so it's a shift from EdTech suitcase collection mode to, okay, I'm going to use this framework and I have EdTech tools for these categories, and I see a gap. So I'm going to go through a process of evaluating and researching before I fill that gap with another EdTech tool. And then I take that toolkit and I implement it consistently in all of my classes and all of the curriculum I develop, so that students and I can become more comfortable and proficient with the tools that we're using. So I'm going to give you guys a couple of examples of EdTech toolkits or frameworks that have been built around choosing EdTech tools. This first example is from St. Paul, Minnesota, and that program was designing a curriculum around customer service for ESL learners. So they were designing a curriculum to teach ESL learners how to deliver customer service. So you can kind of tell from here, right? Greeting customers, going the extra mile, difficult customers. Those were probably the overarching units or modules. And then within that, they took the different language learning areas or language skills like reading, listening, vocabulary, grammar, and they matched EdTech tools to those skills so that for example, if you're learning vocabulary, you're going to create a Google slide deck of each word with a picture and a definition and a sentence and maybe the number of syllables or something like that. But we know that every time we're working with vocabulary, we're going to be using Google Slides. And then for reading comprehension, they were using Google Docs. For grammar, Google Sheets. For listening practice, YouTube, and then for their final assessments, they were using Google Forms. So in our second example, these are EdTech tools that were determined by teaching strategies. This was a presentation at COAID that I highly recommend, and you can find the link in the Wakelet I shared, which I'll share again in the slides that we're going to share at the end. You'll have access to more. If you want to learn more about these different approaches, you will have plenty of information to go on that rabbit trail. But anyway, this was developed by the Literacy Assistance Center in New York, and they created this 7 elements and 3 practices of implementing educational technology. And so they developed what they viewed as the 7 key categories, 7 things that we need for, I think this is mostly applicable to synchronous distance learning. So kind of like you'll see video conferencing platforms, so that's synchronous, and then a whiteboard would also indicate something synchronous, but also distance, because you wouldn't need a video conferencing platform in an in-person class. So for synchronous distance learning, they have these 7 elements. So whiteboard, assessment tool, learning management system, video conferencing platform, interactive learning tool, feedback tool, and content-specific tools. And they encompass them in these 3 key practices. The first one is strive for presence, so presence with the learners. The second one is interactivity is key. So as we know, it's that key piece of engagement and interaction in the classroom. And then the outer ring is let the students do the work. So we can think of maybe rigorous instruction and student-centered learning. The third example of a framework, it was developed by Crowded Learning. And I know there are more out there. I'm just giving these 3 as examples. This was developed by Crowded Learning, and these EdTech tools are determined by the 3 key areas of communication, instructional content, and management and tracking. And so thinking about what tools am I using to communicate with learners, what tools am I using to deliver the content of the class, and what tools am I using to manage and track learners' progress. So what I would like to do now is, before we get into the chat box, I want to know in those different categories and frameworks, if you guys could share some tools that you use in those areas. Now, this engagement opportunity can only fit 25 people. It's a Jamboard. So I know we have more than 25 people here. If you don't feel like doing it, please feel free to sit it out. Or if you want to do it, but you don't want to get into the Jamboard link, feel free to put your answers in the chat box. Or if you want to jump into the Jamboard, then it'll be first come, first serve for the first 25 people. So what I'm going to do is, first I want to show you the Jamboard, and then I'm going to share the link with you. Let me get out of here. Get out of here. Okay, there we go. Okay, so this is the Jamboard. So I have the 3 different frameworks in 3 frames of the Jamboard. So the first one is the customer service example. So we have vocabulary, reading comprehension, grammar, listening, and final assessment. The second frame, so to move to the second frame, you just click this arrow in the top middle. The second frame is the 7 elements and 3 practices. And then the third frame is from crowd-ed learning. So it's the communication, content delivery, and management and tracking. And so I would love for you guys to jump into the Jamboard, and I want you just to give specific examples of what EdTech tools you're using for these different areas. So I can go ahead and give an example for vocabulary, Quizlet. So what I'm doing here is I've clicked on the sticky note button over in the toolkit, and I've typed Quizlet in here, and then I'm just gonna click save. And then if I click cancel, I can exit that window and I can move it over to whichever area I'm giving an example for. So I want you to do the same thing for whiteboard, assessment tool. Jump in here and give a few examples that you can think of EdTech tools used specifically in those different categories. Okay, I think we're ready. Let me get you the link. Oh, yes. Oh, cool. You guys are already putting it in the chat. So we got Zoom for video conferencing, Canvas for an LMS, and then Google Forms for assessment tools, I'm guessing. Okay, so there's the link to the Jamboard. Go ahead and jump in if you want. If you don't want to, go ahead, keep putting them in the chat. Those look great. Nearpod, Remind, Zoom, Padlet, Zoom, Pear Deck, Padlet, Jamboard, yes. And we've got some people in the Jamboard. Go ahead and add your sticky notes. You can go to any of the frames to add your sticky notes. You don't have to fill in the first frame if you don't want to. You can go to the second or the third. Awesome. I'm excited about this. I did this not because I'm going to do some tutorial of all of these EdTech tools, but because I'm hoping that we can all go back to this later. And if we see a gap in our toolkit, we can look at this and say, hey, you know what? The people at the VTI were using XYZ for assessment, and I don't have a good tool for that. So let me look at that. So I'm hoping this will be something you guys go back to later and take a look at these examples. Okay, good. Karen is saying she uses Google Classroom to share materials. We've got Erin with Nearpod. And also, if you're going in the chat, tell me what category that tool fits into. So Erin, what do you use Nearpod for? You can say something like, I use it when we're doing reading comprehension, or you can say, I use it as an assessment or an interactive tool. So give us the category too. Mary says Google Forms for quizzes, Bamboozle for review. Okay, review of what, Mary? What are you reviewing in Bamboozle? And Karen says Newsella for reading comprehension. Great. Okay, and looks like we've got a lot filling in the Jamboard as well. We got vocabulary.com, Quizlet. Somebody put Canvas. Show us where you're using Canvas, or you might need to go to the next page and put Canvas next to a learning management system. We don't have a lot on the second frame. If somebody can jump into that second frame and give some more examples, that'd be awesome. And then we've got some also on the third frame, so Zoom. So remember on the third frame, that third one is management and tracking. I'll put that title there. So what are you using for management and tracking? Zoom would be for communication, right? That can be synchronous or asynchronous communication. Oh yeah, Flipgrid is a great communication tool. And then that second one is content delivery. So I'm just putting those titles there because the icons are can be misleading. Great. Oh, that's awesome. So somebody has a YouTube channel where students create their own videos to post them on the YouTube channel for their department. That's awesome. Okay. Okay, remember we're talking about EdTech tools. So I want to know what tools, not what activities. I'm seeing some activities which are awesome, but I want to know what tool are you using to deliver that activity remotely. Oh, Whiteboard Fi, I see up there. Yes. Must have been a math teacher. Kidding, maybe other teachers are using it too. Okay, so then Donna is putting in the chat Aztec and GED Academy for content specific. And then she put Padlet. Karen is using breakout rooms for role playing. Nice one, Karen. Good. Aaron added Nearpod he's using for interactive, as an interactive tool for vocabulary and building other skills, it looks like. Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to take a look at these, and I want to think about, first of all, I want to know which framework, if you were in the Jamboard, or even if you were just looking at me flip through, which framework do you think works the best? Like, which one is giving you space to include all of the different tools that you use? And which one do you think maybe is too simple or too complicated? Tell me which one you like the best of the three frameworks. So the first one is the determined by curriculum. The second one is the 7 elements. And then the third one is the crowded learning. Tell me which one you liked the best. Okay, Donna says 7 elements. Thank you, Donna, for that vote. Anyone else want to vote on which framework works the best? Danielle agrees, 7 elements. Okay. Cool. A lot of people are saying 7 elements, although Jesse did put curriculum, so you like that one better. Yes, different things for different purposes. Someone said they like all 3. Yeah, totally. Because, you know, if we look at that first one, that's great for curriculum design. If you're designing a curriculum and you can plug in which EdTech tools you're going to use for each curriculum. That second one is great for remote synchronous learning. And then that third one is great just as an overarching, you know, everything that I'm doing with learners, what tools am I using? So I think there are pros and cons to all of them. And I also think which one you choose is going to depend a lot on your role, what you're doing the most, and your format and things like that. So, okay, cool. Thanks, guys. So those are 3 examples, right? And so I just want you to think about, you know, how can we use those frameworks to guide our decisions when it comes to EdTech tools. All right, I'm going back to my slides. So we're using frameworks to develop EdTech toolkits, right? And so just by laying out your responses there and kind of mapping, these are the tools I use and I'm using them for these different purposes, let me know in the chat, based on these examples, on these different frameworks for creating an EdTech toolkit, how do you think that creating an EdTech toolkit would benefit students and learners and students? Same thing. How would an EdTech toolkit benefit students in the chat? So how would choosing my tools and sticking with them, how's that going to help the students? Oh, yes. Okay. Digital literacy. Absolutely. Learning those digital skills and getting proficient and mastering different technologies. Suzanne says addressing different learning styles. Peg says students could choose what may help them or appeal to them best. Donna says meeting different learning style needs. Juanita says differentiation. Okay, any other ideas? How can, if I establish my tools and I don't sway from my tools that I'm using and I implement them consistently and intentionally, how is that going to benefit my students? Betsy Lubitch says increases comfort level with digital tools leads to better job opportunities. Okay, this can even help on a career path. If I'm getting comfortable using Google Docs, then maybe I'm getting comfortable writing my resume there, and then I'm getting comfortable submitting different contracts via Google Docs or whatever it may be. If you can share with the students, they can choose. Okay, yeah, Karen, they could choose their tools that they want to use for the different areas. It's a good idea. It might get messy, right? It might get a little complicated. Donna says comfort. Yes, absolutely. Comfort for students. And that brings me to my next question. How would it benefit instructors? Routine and structure. These are great. Help students remain engaged. Great answers, you guys. Some things I haven't even thought about. So what about instructors, teachers, tutors, volunteers? How would having a set of tools that you're using all the time benefit you as an instructor, as a teacher, as a volunteer? Mary says less stressful. Charla, I love that response about students too, that they can return to the content and review, right? If they're getting comfortable, then they're also getting more comfortable going back and grabbing things from those different tools. I like it. And yes, instructors can organize materials a little more easily if they have a set of tools that they're always working with. Consistency for the teachers. Variety in teaching methods within specific parameters so it's not too much work for a teacher. Yes, if we can as a program or even in curriculum development identify these tools, then those teachers feel more comfortable applying them. Easier to plan lessons if a teacher knows what tools can be used. Love it. Yes, like I said, again, things I have not even thought about. And for anyone here who might be an administrator or anyone who wants to imagine or propose this to their program, how would it benefit an entire program to be using the same set of EdTech tools for the various interactions with students and learning goals? Student retention and reaching benchmarks, maybe, yes, I don't have hard research here. Maybe it could, right? Maybe if they, don't have to be downloading a different app for each class they're taking, maybe they are going to feel more comfortable and maybe that motivates them to study more. And, there could be those benefits. I'm not saying that I've researched it and I know that there are, but there could be. Streamlining professional learning planning, consistency, Steph said, absolutely. Consistency, yes. Easier for students to transition to different levels, even, if they're staying at the same level, easier to transition to a different class because they're already familiar with those tools. Even as a program, for professional development, if all the teachers are using the same tools, we can think about, okay, well, let's make sure that we have a PD option for each of these tools so that all of the teachers can become proficient in it and also so that our whole staff knows how to use them and can guide teachers with them. So yeah, I see a lot of benefits here for all stakeholders. Yeah, great. Easier onboarding for sure. Oh, yay, Charlie, I didn't even think about that. Better collaboration between instructors. If they're all using the same tool, they can troubleshoot together and they know that tool a little better as a group, as a cohort, and they can kind of work through it together. Good idea. Okay, so you guys have outlined a lot of the benefits. In fact, I would go back and remake this slide based on a lot of your responses, but yes, all of those benefits that you put in the chat, and then also just decision making, right? So this having a framework can help guide us to what tools we want to use and gives us a thoughtful process for making decisions around these tools. Consistency, that was a big one I saw. Consistency for students and instructors, consistency for students moving into other classes, consistency for instructors building their lesson plans, absolutely. And then proficiency, a lot of you mentioned, instructors and students are going to become more comfortable with these tools, and that's motivating, right? That's, for me as an instructor, when I'm designing a lesson plan, if I know what tools I'm using already, that's motivating me to like get going and I can just jam it out. For a student, if I am not constantly overcoming these hurdles of learning a tool, right, and I'm feeling more comfortable, good. Now I'm rolling in my learning, which should be the main focus, right? All right, so now we come to evaluating the tools. So how do we choose the tools? We have a framework, right? Let's say we're using the 7 elements and we're looking at the whiteboard section and we're just thinking this through. Do I want to make the Zoom whiteboard feature? Is that gonna be my whiteboard? Or do I want to use something like Jamboard? How do we evaluate these tools and come to these decisions? So I'm going to talk about just a couple of guiding questions as you have outlined your framework and you're seeing a gap somewhere and you're trying to make a decision about the tool. The first question might seem painfully obvious. What does the tool do? How will I use it? Does it work with other tools that I use? Is it accessible? What is the student experience like? What format will I use it in? And is it going to last? And so let's talk about each of these questions. The first one is, what does this tool do? This might seem hilarious, but we have to think about it, right? What does the tool do? And so if we are going and we're trying to fill a gap in our EdTech Toolkit, so we're going to different websites. We talked to some teachers about what they're using. We're going to look at the website and see what the tool does. What are the different features? Keep in mind, right, the advertising aspect. The website is going to make it seem like this tool is going to launch your student into a pathway to become an engineer within 2 weeks. So, you know, keep those things in mind as you're looking at the website. Talk with other instructors who have used it, right? What does the tool do? What are you using it for? What skills do you find it's particularly efficient at building, or what kind of engagement do you use it for in your classroom? And then think about, how are you already accomplishing that task, and compare, right? So maybe, for example, two similar tools. Let's just use Google Slides and PowerPoint, okay? So I have Google Slides and PowerPoint, and they do the same thing. And right now I'm using Google Slides. So do I want to switch to PowerPoint? No, I have a perfectly good tool that does all of the same things. Now, as I go through the following questions, maybe I will change my mind about that. But don't switch just because it's different. Switch for a better reason, because it's better in some way. But if it's the same and it does the same things, maybe you have a tool that does that fine and you don't need to make any adjustments. And then how will I use it? And how will I use it goes beyond just having fun in the classroom, right? We want to really think about the underlying strategies, right? Is this something that is going to build critical thinking? Is it something that's going to help me deliver explicit instruction on a topic? What are the underlying strategies that I'm trying to get at, and how am I going to use this tool to engage in those strategies, or to make the learning really salient? And oh yeah, this is exactly what I just said. Focus on progress and evidence-based strategies. So think beyond, is this going to be fun and interactive, into, is this something that's going to push us closer to learning objectives, and is it based on evidence-based strategies for learning? So somebody put something in the chat. Good, you guys chat me. Charla says, throughout this year of moving online, I've seen a lot of instructors trying to use tools in ways that the tool was not really designed to be used. Okay, interesting, right? And could be okay if you're leveraging the tool in a different way that's actually maybe more effective for your goals or your strategies. Cool. If you're using it in a way that is lessening the value, the learning value of it, maybe try to go back to, what are the strong strategies that I know of? What are the approaches and methods that I know work for learning? And am I using this tool in a way that aligns with those methods? Go back to that teaching 101. I have to go back to that all the time. Does it work with other tools I use? Okay, so here we're talking about integration. Does it integrate with other tools I use? And so we can go back to the Google Slides PowerPoint example, and we can say, oh, you know what? We use Google Classroom. And so Google Slides is a better choice because it integrates with Google Classroom. Or vice versa, we are using, what's an LMS? Blackboard, which is more Microsoft friendly. And so maybe I want to do PowerPoint. Those, you know, they can go back and forth, but you see what I'm saying, right? So you want to choose a tool that's going to work well with your other tools. Yeah, thank you, Peg. Can condense what works and what isn't the best. Yeah. And Monica says, would you recommend for students who are beginners with these tools and seem to develop avoidance and resistance? I'm going to let other teachers in the room chime in on that great question. And I think that the main thing here, like I've mentioned in previous slides, is learning objectives. We have to connect these tools with what the students have come to our class to learn and help them understand how these tools are going to help them learn that. We also need to establish some buy-in around digital literacy and talk about how learning new technologies is so important for digital resilience, because then it moves you into the position where when healthcare develops new technologies, you're ready to learn them and adapt to them. And obviously with, beginner English language learners, it might be hard to explain those concepts, but what we can do is we can explain that using technology is now something that impacts every area of our lives. It impacts our parenting, it impacts our access to healthcare, it impacts our access to education, it impacts our access to jobs, right? So I think buy-in around digital literacy as a whole is another way to get learners to be more open to learning tools. And as we've outlined, if we keep the tools consistent, they also will have less of a resistance to always, if they're always going into a class that has new tools, that could be very frustrating. I get it. I wouldn't want to do that. Okay, so integrations. And then also thinking just about the interface is, do they have similar buttons and features as other tools you're using? That's kind of a next step to the integration. Does it look like other tools that I'm using? Is the share button the same? And that gets into those digital skills where if it's something that looks a little more familiar, it's a repetitive concept that is helping students understand it better and apply their knowledge. So thinking about just the layout and having similar features that you can use. So even if it's like, I have this tool that lets me share a QR code and I'm teaching my students how to use QR codes, and this tool also uses QR codes. And so from now on, maybe I deliver everything from these two tools with a QR code because my students are getting more familiar and mastering that. And then is it accessible? And yeah, I'm glad Donna brought up in the chat that about apps versus software. Apps, software, websites, those are all different things. And so think about, are students having to download an app to use your tool? That's okay if you're going to use it all the time. Like in our program, we use Google Classroom. And so I encourage everyone to have them download an app because for every class they use it. And then, software, that's something you download onto a computer. Or a website, that's something on the web that's web-based that they can just navigate to. So yeah, thinking about the delivery of those the content is important too. Anyway, is it accessible? So here we want to think about, again, the interface being similar to other tools. Is it mobile friendly? Thinking about the sign-up process. What is it like to register for this tool? How much spam email is it going to send me? And how much information do they need from me to be able to sign up for it? Is it a sign up with Google? Because that's what I love personally in my own life. I just want to sign up for everything with Google. Is it functional on a mobile phone? Super important when we know that a lot of adult learners are learning on their mobile phones. And then readability. Is it, you guys know, right? You know that there are apps and websites that have a million words and a million different colors, and it's very difficult to navigate them or to even look at them, right? And then there are some that are very simple and have a simple layout and are a lot easier to digest. So just even that simple process of comparison and contrast can be helpful. Okay, and then what is the student experience like? And that's similar to the previous one of it being accessible, but here we need to test, test, test. You need to join everything as a student and learn something on that tool as a student, or experience something on that tool as a student before you ever bring it to your classroom, because that's gonna show you every step that they have to go through to access your instruction. It's going to show you every glitch along the way. It's going to show you every potential problem that they're going to run into. So test, test, test these tools. Test them from your perspective. Test them from the student's perspective. Join as a student. Try to learn something with it. Get your teachers together on a Zoom meeting. Get your friends together and use the polling feature on Zoom to see if that's an effective way to use it with your students. Get your teachers together and have them put you in a breakout room so that you know how to teach students how to leave the breakout room and get back to the main room. Just test it out, test it out. Thank you for that. Amen, Jennifer. I feel strongly about that one. Okay, and then what format will I use it in? So think about too, like we looked at the 7 elements, and like I said, that's great for a synchronous remote format. Some of those pieces change if you're gonna be in person or if it's gonna be asynchronous online instruction. So think through what format am I going to use it in? That's gonna change the tool. If we look at these 2 tools, can anyone recognize this first icon? What's this first picture here? What is that of? The black one. Windows? No, that's not it, Peg. It's Zoom. It's a Zoom feature. Yeah, Michael, it's the breakout rooms. It's the breakout rooms in Zoom. So we have breakout rooms in Zoom and we have Flipgrid. Now, as an ESL instructor, I like to use both of those for speaking practice, right? So which one I use is going to depend on, are we synchronous or asynchronous? Because Flipgrid would not make sense if I'm in a Zoom. Okay, Peg, that's okay. You're right. It's very similar to the Windows icon. That's okay, no judgment here. If we are in a Zoom meeting, it doesn't make a lot of sense for me. And if you're doing this, it's okay. I'm sure you've found a great way to do it. But I'm just saying it probably doesn't make a lot of sense for me to have my students go into Flipgrid and record a video of something. Whereas if we're in Zoom, it would make sense for them to have that discussion in a breakout room. And vice versa, right? If I want them to be doing something asynchronously, use speaking practice asynchronously, Flipgrid makes sense. They can do a discussion board using short clips and videos. Breakout rooms don't make that much sense because then they have to get into a whole meeting to do it. So, you know, that format thing will really change your tools. Does anyone else have an example of like something you use synchronously that you don't use asynchronously and vice versa? It's like it only works one way or the other. If you have that example, put it in the chat, please. I'm intrigued by that. And then our last guiding question, is this tool going to last? This is hard for us to answer because we're not all app developers here. I don't think, maybe some of you are. I am not. But it's worth doing a minimal amount of research into how popular the tool is and what other well-known developers is it connected with. So we know like Jamboard and Edpuzzle, those are connected to Google. And I think that gives them some clout, some longevity. So I feel good about using those tools at this point in time. YouTube is the most popular tool, and I'm gonna share this website too. It's the most popular tool on this website that shows like the top tools for EdTech. So we can feel pretty comfortable using YouTube. That's going to change, and it's hard for us to know, but it's worth doing, like I said, just a basic search and seeing how popular the tool is to know if it's going to last and therefore if it's a good thing to add to my toolkit. So I have created for you guys an EdTech Toolkit guide, a guide for creating your toolkit. And it goes through these steps of choosing a framework, identifying gaps based off the framework, evaluating the tools, so that checklist and those guiding questions we just went into, implementing consistently, and then reevaluate and adapt, okay? And so step 4 and 5, those are just the on the ground things, right? After you've gone through that checklist, you're like, okay, you know what? This is a tool and I've got my complete toolkit. I'm gonna use it in class consistently. I'm going to try to get students really proficient with it. I'm going to master it. We're all going to be able to go into these higher levels of skill with it. And then, of course, the landscape is always changing. So maybe I have to reevaluate and I have to adapt, or maybe I'm going to teach for another program and they use a different suite. And so I need to change because of that, or whatever it may be. But you have to be prepared to adapt. That's part of that digital resilience. So I want to show you guys the EdTech Toolkit guide. I'm going to share it with you, And that's going to be the end of our time together today, unfortunately, but I hope that you guys have a lot of good questions and advice for everyone, so we can keep it going in the chat. Okay, so, oh, what am I doing here? Just trying to grab this link so I can show you guys the guide. I'm going to put the link in the chat as well. In the guide, it has the different frameworks we talked about. It has, here it comes. Okay. It has the framework, so it has the 3 examples that I showed you, and then there are links here to learn more about each of those examples. So if you really like the 7 elements and you want to explore that a little more or get advice on different tools that plug into that, you can click on these links and then identify gaps, right? So once we have the framework, we can look at it, we can say, you know what? Whiteboard, I've got a great whiteboard tool. I'm going to stick with it. It works great with my learners. So no need to make any different moves there. Let's go. Let's see if we can. So maybe even just looking at this at a glance, I can say maybe there are some gaps in feedback tools. And so maybe that's something we all need to research a little more and get a tool that works really well for feedback. So, you know, you kind of plug in your different things into your framework and identify the gaps there. Once you've identified a gap, you can go through the process of evaluating different tools, getting your other teachers on board. What are they using? And then going through the checklist, making sure it's going to be accessible to your learners and work well with them. This is the link to that thing I just showed you. I had a screenshot of it here of the most popular tools, and it gets updated. So you can always see which ones are at the top, and maybe those are worth your time and investment in learning those and evaluating them. And then, of course, steps 4 and 5, like I said, implement consistently and reevaluate, adapt as needed. So putting the link to that in the chat, you guys, please, any questions you have or anything you want to add to the points that I've made, I'd love to hear from you. So go ahead and pop them in the chat box. Still got 9 minutes. Hope I didn't talk too fast. Yeah, Annette, we will definitely send the slides to you. I have a Wakelet where you can access all the slides. Oh, sorry, you know, I should have showed you this too. My email, rriggs@frederick.edu. I'm on Twitter @RachelTSaul. I'm gonna put, oh goodness, I think I lost the link to the Wakelet myself. I'm gonna put the link to the Wakelet in the chat again. The Wakelet has the slides, and so if you can get into the Wakelet, it's a single URL, and you can access everything from today. Good, I'm glad, Danielle. Thank you, everyone. If you're hopping off, thanks for sticking around. I hope it was helpful. Wakelet's a great tool for content delivery, lesson planning, great tool for curation. Here is the link to the Wakelet in the chat box. And you know what, I'm gonna add this, I'm gonna add the guide to that Wakelet. That makes sense. Oh, great, Michael, thank you so much. Thank you, Sherry. Thanks, everyone. Good, Charla. We also are using Burlington English. I think it's a good tool. It's a good content tool. Oh, Karen, anytime you want to do a little workshop with different EdTech tools, please just let me know. I'm always happy to do that. It's fun for me. So, you know, just shoot me an email or something. Great. Donna, you'll be great. You'll be doing amazing. That's great to know. This is new to you. It was new to all of us a year ago. So you're going to do great. Absolutely. Thank you, Pat Simons. Good to see you. Happy you could join us. All right. Oh, the guide is already in here. What am I doing? Let's get out the guide. It's already in here. Okay, good.
So I put in the chat the links to the feedback survey and also for the proof of participation. So I want to thank Rachel Riggs. If you have any more questions, please, you can continue to put them in the chat. But I want to thank her for her sharing her invaluable knowledge with us and her expertise. She has a real passion for this. So thank you very much for sharing your passion.
Thank you, Ramona. Thank you so much. It's really my pleasure. Awesome, Erin. I'm glad you found it useful. Good, good, good. I'm gonna I'll add the Jamboard too to the Wakelet, and you guys can see the different tools that people added, in case you need one, in case you have a gap in your toolkit. Okay, so the Jamboard's in there now too. I think that Wakelet has everything. Let me see, there's more chats. Okay, it looks like someone doesn't see the survey, so I'm gonna re-share
I'm
that.
getting it in there
Okay.
again.
I didn't teach until, yeah, Lin, I know they're doing the recording too, so that will be posted, I think, after the VTI is over and they have time to get all this on YouTube.
Yeah, for the recordings, we should have them up by June 30th, and the proof of participation just allow a week after the end of the last session, which would be Thursday afternoon.
Great. Charlotte, regarding your question, I don't know if you're still here. You've met with some resistance because they're concerned about online security. Yes, I think we all have been through that, and it does limit what we can access. I would encourage you to be a part of that conversation. Don't let them determine your EdTech toolkit, but make proposals. You know, that's what a lot of programs are looking for. They're looking for someone who knows how it's going to work on the ground with students. Make a proposal. This tool is going to help me teach this because it has this assessment feature, because I can track progress with this. It engages students in this way. And for all of these reasons, I need to be able to use it in my classes. How can I apply to get it approved? What privacy features does it need to have so that I can narrow my search? But be a part of that conversation. Don't back down from that, because educators should be a crucial part of the conversation around what tools you can use in the classroom. So I would encourage you to go through that proposal process and sell it and ask them, right? Make it two-way. What does it need to have so that I can use it, so that I can look for a tool that's going to be really effective? You can do it. You'll be great. And sometimes it'll be a hard no, and then you just say, okay, back to the drawing board. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, it looks like there are no more questions, so I am going to stop the recording.
Great.
And again, thank you so much, Rachel.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Ramona. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day. Don't forget to go to other presentations today. I am presenting at 2 on digital inclusion. So if you want to join that, I'd love to see you.